So I get to be the last one, so I'm between you and the weekend. So let's see how fast I can go through this. So I'm going to cover automation, very much automation focused, but going to try and talk a lot about security in this. In my opinion, automation is kind of the next step when you're talking security. So, you know, automation is coming. We're seeing it with self-driving cars. We're seeing it with, you know, pretty well everything is getting automated. Robotics has been out there forever. So, you know, a little bit of a cartoon on everything being automated, including, you know, panhandling. So this is kind of the overall agenda. Just going to cover automation, orchestration, DevOps, kind of the differences between the three. We hear all three terms. I'll try and differentiate as much as I can between the three. Some of the challenges and trends that we see. So what's actually driving automation? And then we're going to talk a bit about automating human-driven workflows. But more than that, we're going to talk about event-driven workflows. And then why automation is definitely a part of your security posture and why it just makes everything more secure. Then a little bit we'll touch on getting started. So the thing about me and PowerPoints and agendas, I'm probably going to end up segueing all over the place, so they're just guidelines. So let's talk about automation, orchestration, and DevOps. So what is the difference? We're hearing these terms. So automation is, you know, it's a single task or procedure that you're putting some sort of a script around. So, you know, in this example, if you're changing like an SNMP community, if you're changing passwords across devices, so you're automating a task. So you're putting a script around a task, and then you're pushing that script out to do what you used to do manually, and now you're automating it. Now we actually have a lot of tools that already do this, right? So one of the things is, though, that we have tools that might do this. So you might have tools that do this for your Unix environment. You might have tools that do this for your Windows environment. You might have tools that do this for your network environment. So you probably have tools that already do this for you. One of the things that I think in the next step of automation in this, and especially in a holistically secure environment, is you're going to have tools, and you want to have tools that cover a large gambit of your infrastructure, whether it's Unix, Linux, Windows, routers, switches, you know, a more holistic, even applications. The more we can do in a centralized location and give us more control, that gives you a little bit of a better security posture. The next thing we hear a lot about is orchestration. So what's the difference between automation and orchestration? So orchestration takes this idea of automating a task, and now we take multiple tasks and you automate a workflow. So, you know, the example I've put here is if you want to enable end-to-end connectivity through switches and routers and et cetera for an application, that would be an orchestration. So, you know, if you roll out say a container and you want to enable end-to-end for your users, the orchestration portion would be to, you know, set up a VNI interface for the VXLAN, to enable any firewall rules you need, to set up any virtualized ports. All of that would be the orchestration part of it. Where does DevOps come in? So DevOps is kind of the next step. Now, this is where your developer, when they push out a version of their application and they push out an instance of that application, the operational portion that needs to happen, everything that happens in the orchestration, that workflow takes care of itself. So no longer does your developer need to call you and say, can you do this for me? Can you enable this access? Can you create this firewall rule? Can you give these users access? That's all a part of your DevOps environment. So there's one of the things that we're seeing a lot now is the cloud. What do you guys think is pushing people to the cloud? Sorry? That's actually true. Yeah. So accounting, it gives you a cost reduction according to, you know, what the cloud provider is saying. But where does that cost reduction come from? When you go and you plug in an instance at Amazon AWS or at Azure or at Google, and you spin up your EC2 instance, for example, you don't have to worry about any of the back end that happened to get that EC2 instance working. All of that's all done for you. That's all automated. And the reason that matters to accountants is because Amazon can do that way cheaper than most of us are doing it, because we're not automating that. We haven't automated that. So it costs less, and that's the value of the cloud. And then you can also do the DevOps in the cloud, right? So you've got your developers, when they push something in the cloud, the DevOps portion, that all can be taken care of too. If you have the services that purchased from the cloud, you got to pay for it, but it all gets done. So that's where the value of the cloud comes in, is the savings, and the security that they have around that. Is that if company A spins up an instance and company B spins up an instance, they are separate from each other. So there's inherent security built into that automated environment. So automation is not about taking away people's jobs, right? It's not about, we want to reduce workforce. That's always a fear when people hear automation is what's going to happen to me as a network administrator, or what's going to happen to me as a firewall guy. And the reality is automation is about changing the way we think. So it's about the systems, the people, the organization. It's about a change on the way you do things rather than reducing headcount. So these are some of the efficiencies that this is done by IDC. So before automation, you're spending 64% of your time essentially just doing what we call busy work. Nobody likes busy work. After automation, that gets reduced to 45%. And this was actually just with network automation. The more automation you do in your environment, the less busy work there is. What does that free you guys up to do as security people, as network people, as server people? It gets you to do the cool stuff. It gets you to improve your environment. It gets you to take your environment from where it is today to where you want it to be tomorrow. You're not busy doing the administration, the stuff that really we do it, nobody likes to do that. You want to do the new stuff. You want to do the cool stuff, right? So that's what automation is meant to do. So this is an interesting graph because where is the inflection point where automation becomes valuable to you? If you've got a very small environment, you're not going to invest very much in automation. Once you grow to the point where you need automation, and if you don't have it, things can quickly spiral out of control where suddenly you don't have enough resources. We hear so much about we don't have enough security people. It's hard to find security people. The reality is that we need to learn to use the tools that we have better. We need to learn how to take the day-to-day and make that more of an automated process, so that we're not killing our guys with doing firewall changes and things along that lines. Hunting the security threats on their own. So this is why you kind of need to automate. Everything's kind of in its own little silo. You've got all these fragmented little things. You've got multiple teams. You've got all these applications. You've got all this different types of connectivity. Everybody has their ideas around what goes where and who can access what and what kind of security everybody needs. You've got multiple sources of truth. So really, there's so much fragmentation. One of the things that we do really well is we're all specialized, a lot of us, in certain things, right? We might be very focused in our area. So as overall security people, we need to come together and understand that security needs to take a more overall view. So your desktop guys, your firewall guys, your database guys, they all need to come together and make it a more of a, what goes in what silo from a perspective of technology, culture, and processes, which are the three kind of what I call, or what we call the pillars of automation. Because you need to build around these three to make automation as a part of your company culture. So where's automation going, and where is it today? Oh. Okay. So day zero, like I was saying, this is the human-driven stuff. So this is the stuff that's really easy to automate. So this is the things like password changes, SNMP string changes, stuff that you do. You log into a box manually and you change it, and then you log into another box and you change it. We've got systems now. Almost everybody has those that can do that at a large scale. Day one, and this is really where security starts to play. So this is event-driven automation. Event-driven automation is when you have something that is outside of what a human does. So for example, a security incident is a perfect example. And that security incident now drives a script or a change in the environment. That is essentially event-driven automation. The next one is the machine-driven, machine learning automation. This is where things are interesting and things will get more interesting. So we had a couple of gentlemen. One was talking about baselining your network. Another talked about threat hunting. So you kind of bring that together and you start thinking, well, should we do that as human-driven? Should we do that as people and try and baseline it? Or, do we grab our baselines, we throw it into a big data system and let our machines determine what our baselines are, and then let the machine learn when you deviate from those baselines, and not just network baselines, but processors on a machine, on a PC. So if the processor normally averages 25 to 30% a day, and suddenly it's sitting at 55%, there is above your baseline. But as individuals, as people, we probably can't do that. But if you have a machine doing that for you, now it can learn that this is happening. And then, at some point, it'll send you, hey, is this normal? You go look at it, not normal, and then you act upon it. Now it's learned. Next time it sees that, it'll take the appropriate action. And as it learns, it'll start to understand, what's normal, what's not normal. And then the only time you'll need human intervention is where the machine is kind of like, oh, I don't know what to do with this. But the more we're able to learn what's normal and what's abnormal, and the machine is able to, and we put that into the system, and the system's able to learn that, the less we have to do as administrators, and automation takes care of that for you. So, and that's really the panacea of where automation can take us from a security perspective, is that we're no longer having to threat hunt, we're no longer having to look for vulnerabilities ourselves. We're no longer having to go through our logs and look for problems. It's all done kind of on the back end. So human-driven workflows, always the easiest to automate. So if you've got human-driven workflows that you're still doing manually, this is really the low-hanging fruit. So how do you find, what should I automate? If you're doing it over and over again, right? If you're something that you're every 6 months, you get a bunch of people and you go through a process. It's repeatable, it requires several steps, needs more than a couple of users, time sensitive and error prone. I've done, in past lives where you had to go through and change passwords on, 30, 40 devices, done it manually, and there were 4 or 5 of us doing it. That's a couple hundred devices. How many of those do you think we accidentally typed in the wrong password? Quite a few. It's like, 1 in 10, which is like 10%. We would have to go back. And so that's the type of work. And the cost on doing that manually. So if you're doing anything in your environment that fits these, whether it's on Windows servers, whether it's in Linux, whether it's it's switching, routing, firewalls. These type of manual processes, start looking at these and say, how can we take these things and now make them into an automated process? And here's why. So on the bottom of this, it's all about time. So if you do something like this manual, in this example I'm using, you've got an administrator that leaves, and every device has generally a root password. I mean, we're trying to get away from that, but still, you need to have a back door if you get locked out or if no other authentication works. So say that guy leaves, now you got to do this manually. You're talking, depending on the number of devices, it could be hours, days. It could even be weeks if you do it manually. If you have an automated system, it's probably going to take you a few minutes, right? The reality is you go, you decide on a new password, or you generate a password, you throw it into your system, and it's done. So minutes. From a security perspective, if this guy's gruntled, he's got all disgruntled. He's got all that time to possibly come in and do damage to you. In this, he probably won't be able to do any damage, right? So there's, from a security perspective, why this matters. Event-driven. So, non-user-driven workflows. So things like security incidents, network outages, things that happen because of something non-human driven. So, power outage or a reboot or something that is unexpected on the environment. That's an event. But the other thing to think about is when I walk into, Nate with my phone and I connect to the Wi-Fi, that is also an event. And onboarding me, making sure I'm on the right VLAN, I'm making sure I'm not, that I'm not connected into, like, for example, a network I shouldn't be, that's also an event. So, that managing that access is also automation. And, that's often handled by a network access control system. That is an automation system. We call them different things, but we have some of these systems around. The important thing is to get these guys working together. So, events. You guys remember back in the days when SMB type of viruses were a big deal? You'd get a virus, and the first thing it would try and do is find open shares. Now it's ransomware, where the ransomware tries to go out and lock down as many machines as possible and infect. So again, minutes to hours if you catch that and try and resolve it manually. You get some sort of an alert, some sort of a ticket goes out, and then people are running around trying to find the person. Maybe they're on a Wi-Fi and they're moving from access point to access point, or boardroom to boardroom. They're not even from your environment. That can take a long time. You automate that, that's seconds. That you automate your system, your firewall, whatever you have that's going to detect that threat, it's going to take that and neutralize that threat almost immediately. So again, time is a factor. Time is the number one thing when it comes to security and threats. And that's what automation buys you. So let's kind of get into a little bit of when you're automating security events, it's actually as simple as if then, right? If this happens, then take this action. So for example, if an infection is detected, then assign to a quarantine VLAN. So, obviously, as IT people, we've all seen pseudocode. How this looks in your environment will vary. Whether it's some sort of a system that you've purchased or it's a system that you've developed, this is essentially what you're going to be doing. And what goes under that if will grow, right? So, a couple of, if you see a port scan, if I see an infected file, if, and then, you can just add to it. And that if statement can grow. but you kind of get the picture. So, time is your enemy. Okay, I mentioned this. So automation of both human-driven events, it's all about reducing the time. It's all about the time to recover. Find that event, act, don't let that infection spread, and keep yourself safe. So, what does it all look like? I have a pretty solid network background, so I'm going to go on the network side of things. So you're going to have a bunch of switches, probably, you have some sort of an NGFW firewall of some sort. You probably take some sort of scans off your switches for like a flow data off your switches, put that into some sort of a SIM and a logging. Then you'll have what we call, I've called it an analytics engine, some sort of telemetry, some sort of intelligence. What that is, there's products available, there's things that are kind of coming. Is anything kind of ready? There's probably a few things you can plug into to work on these threats. But really the reality is that analytics engine, whatever you use, it has to be customized for your environment, right? So for example, if you have a SCADA environment and you're going to see a certain, SCADA traffic generally is very, very low bandwidth. So it's going to, maybe your analytics engine now has to be programmed for that very low bandwidth. An attack on a SCADA environment is something we call low and slow. So it could just be, instead of 16K of traffic, you're seeing 18K of traffic. So now your analytics engine needs to understand that. So whatever analytics engine you use, whatever telemetry you're going to use, whatever intelligence you're going to use to create your, do the intelligence behind your automation, then that's going to go into your automation tool and say, hey, go take this action on my firewall or my switches, block that MAC address or move that MAC address to quarantine or what have you. There's some very large environments that I'm aware of where there are thousands and thousands and thousands of switches, and there are less than 10 network administrators. What they do to make changes, if you remember that statement, if it's happened before, it's going to happen again. Generally, if you're making a change once, you're probably going to make it again. So all they do is they log into their automation tool. They don't have access to their firewall. They don't have access to their switches. They can only go into their automation tool, write scripts, write programming, do some programming on there, and then that gets reviewed and then pushed out. So once that one is written once, now you go in, you change some variables, and then you do it again for your next change or what have you. So, how do you get started? It's a bit of an eye chart. I'm going to step back here. So, really, it's all about what are you looking to get out of it. You got to have a strategy, and you got to dig into the why. Why am I going to do this? Is it just to reduce costs? That's honestly not going to. That's not a good driver to automate, because the way things are getting complicated, if you want to do anything in a black box, someone talked about outsourcing yesterday. Outsourcing to an extent is like, let me try and throw everything in this black box and not worry about it. The work still has to happen. So determine what you want. Why are you automating? Are you looking for, what kind of efficiencies are you looking for? Dig into the why. Why do I want my switches to be automated? Why do I want my Unix guys to not be able to log directly into my Unix box the only one? So dig into the why you want to do this. Lay that out as a very robust strategy on automation. Understand the skill sets that are required. So this is something that's really changed in the past 3 to 4 years, right? A lot of guys that are maybe network admins or Unix admins or whatever, some of us hadn't written code in 15, 20 years. Now we gotta go and learn Python. Gotta go learn how to script, how to write code. So coding skills are now becoming more and more valuable. Again, we say there's not a lot of security people out there. NATE graduates a lot of coders every year, U of A, U of C, SAIT. So coders are out there. You gotta maybe teach them a little bit of security and some network protocols. So understand the skill sets that are out there. So, and understand the automation capabilities of your platforms. Are your platforms, what kind of APIs do they have? What can they do from an automation perspective? What kind of automation do they support? Are they automation averse? There are platforms out there that are really closed. And so understand that capability. And then you're going to look at tool sets. And tool sets is where you really want to look at something that automates not just one subset of your environment. And we talked earlier about teams. You want to bring all your teams together to decide on your tool set, because you don't want a tool set that just does one type of infrastructure in your. You don't want something that just does servers. You don't want something that just does virtualization. You want something that does as broad as possible. So you decide on your tool sets, and then from there, it's you got to start small. You start with the easy, the low-hanging fruit. First you automate, then you orchestrate, and then you move to DevOps. And honestly, I mean, unless you're actually writing code and deploying code into an environment, there's a lot of us that won't ever even move into DevOps. So again, this means kind of breaking some of those walls. This means your firewall guy's now got to go talk to your Windows guy. We need to have those cross-functional teams, people that can collaborate with each other. We need you need your goals clearly laid out. Outside an approach to everything, essentially, understanding what you're trying to get at. And you want to evangelize the benefits of automation. Not everybody's going to understand. Like we talked earlier, there's going to be resistance. Some folks are going to think you're going to take their jobs, and that's not really how it works. It's going to be a change in the way folks do their jobs. It's not hard to go and learn Python. It's a couple of weeks, to be honest. So, allow people to make mistakes. I don't know. Anybody here never made a mistake? I've taken down some very large environments. I'm not going to say which and how, but it's, we've all done it. When you instead of putting the IP address instead of putting your default gateway in the default gateway, you put in the IP address, and now you've duplicated the default gateway for an entire organization of 10,000 people and killed everybody's internet access. Yeah. Automation would have solved that problem. So a lot of tools out there. I mean, it's a bit of an eye chart. There's a lot of people doing this. But if you look at this list, there's some that are going to stand out. Python has taken over as really the de facto language for automation. And there's a few here that need agents. There's a few that work with certain platforms. Some work better with others. Interestingly enough, a lot of these automation tools talk to each other. So let's say you want to go and start saying, okay, I want to go start playing with what is this automation thing. So Ansible, and it's easy to install. I work for Juniper. I don't work for Ansible, but I'm just going to put it out there. So there's a freeware version which you can use. It's all CLI based. It really gives you an idea of what automation looks like. And I think it can do things like Linux automation. It can do automation for a lot of network devices. And a lot of network devices are ripe for automation. And Python. So Codecademy, anybody use it? Codecademy's got a pretty good course on Python. Of course, Python, you can learn it at NATE and SAIT and all those places. Coursera has information on Python. So if you want to learn kind of where do I go from here, automation is coming. It's going to, how do I enable myself to be at the forefront of being a leader? Python is a good place to start. And that's it. So, I'll let you guys get to the weekend. Thank you.